change in schedule, but we know we have the PGA 12:30, and I have guests at noon. So I just want to make sure the guests have ample time. And the guests will be Anita Bhatia, the Assistant Secretary General for UN Women and Deputy Director of UN Women, joined by Maria Francesca Spatolisano, the Assistant Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, and Katie Tobin, the Senior Program Manager for Women's Environment and Development Organization. They'll be here to talk to you about progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, the Gender Snapshot. As we've mentioned a number of times, the Secretary General is heading to Pakistan this evening for a solidarity visit with the millions of men, women, and children impacted by the historic floods in the country. He will arrive in Islamabad on Friday, September 9th, and is scheduled to meet with senior government officials. He'll then travel to the area most impacted by this unprecedented climate catastrophe. The Secretary General will meet with displaced families and also witness how we, along with our partners, are supporting the government's relief efforts to provide assistance to the millions of people who need it. He'll be back in New York on the morning of September 11th. Sorry, I'm multitasking here, which is not a good thing to do. And not good for live television either. The Security Council this morning held an open meeting on Somalia and was briefed by the Secretary General's Special Representative, James Swan. He said the political climate in Somalia is now more conducive to addressing key national priorities following the conclusion of the contentious electoral process back in May. Mr. Swan stressed that the UN is committed to supporting Somalis in achieving their national priorities. And as you heard yesterday from Martin Griffiths, Mr. Swan also noted Somalia is facing a humanitarian catastrophe with some 7.8 million men, women, and children. That's nearly half of the country's estimated population is being impacted by the worst drought in at least 4 decades. And at 3 p.m., there will be an open briefing on Ukraine. We expect Rosemary DiCarlo, the head of political affairs, to brief you, along with the Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights. And that's at 3 p.m. We'll try to get you those remarks ahead of time, and I won't go over the coverage yesterday in the Security Council where the Secretary General and Mr. Grossi spoke about the nuclear power plant. Meanwhile, our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, continues her visit to Egypt. She spoke at the International Cooperation Forum and meeting of African Ministers of Finance, Economy, and the Environment in preparation for COP27. She said that as many parts of the world are simultaneously facing the fury of climate change and a cost of living crisis, it's time for implementation at scale and with a sense of urgency. We must go beyond statements, she said, and act on concrete initiatives with clear pathways to investments. Future generations will not remember today's speeches, she said, but they will remember our actions. Ms. Mohammed also met today with Prime Minister Mustafa Mabdouli to discuss Egypt's efforts to advance sustainable development and prepare for the upcoming COP27. She also met with Sami Shukri, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the President of COP27 to continue discussions on the forthcoming high-level week of the General Assembly, as well as the diplomatic and substantive preparations for COP27. She will be back, the Deputy Secretary General, that is, back in New York tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you saw that yesterday we issued a statement on Burkina Faso, strongly condemning the attack by IED, by improvised explosive device, that took place on September 5th and killed many civilians. Despite the weather outside, today is the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. This year's theme is Air We Share and focuses on transboundary nature of air pollution, stressing the need for collective accountability and action. In his message, the Secretary General said that clean air, a stable climate, and a healthy nature are human rights. And today we have reached the magical number of 123. That's the number of member states who've paid up their dues in full, 123. The latest check comes from a nation that is home to two natural UNESCO World Heritage sites. Both sites are listed for their outstanding natural beauty and home to several endemic endangered species, including the giant turtle. What country were we talking about? Huh? You're clearly last in the class. No. Okay, Seychelles. We thank our friends in Victoria. I was about to say, speaking of Victoria, James, but I won't say. Go ahead. Oh, you are? Oh, then you go first, Michelle. Yeah, there you go. A different Victoria. Yeah.
The great Australian state of Victoria.
Excellent. They have not paid their dues in. I mean, they don't pay. Sorry. We thank Australia always.
A question, please, on President Putin's remarks this morning on the grain deal. He's saying that it's not helping the poorer countries, it's not helping Russia, and he's kind of casting doubt over whether Russia will agree to renew it in November when it's due to come up. What is the Secretary General's response?
Look, first of all, I think we have been working very closely with the Russian Federation on, and our other partners in this, which is mainly the US, the EU, the UK, and others, on the facilitation of trade of Russian grain and Russian fertilizer to global markets. It's, as the Secretary General said a number of times, it's very important to get those commodities back to market. We have seen firsthand the issue of what happens when there's not enough fertilizers. The discussions are going on, I think, at a very constructive and professional level. Just today in Geneva, there was a meeting going on between the Russian Federation and the UN under the auspices of Rebecca Greenspan, the head of UNCTAD, to fully operationalize the agreement that was signed in Istanbul and eliminate the bottlenecks to food and fertilizer trade from the Russian Federations. Discussion with the Russian delegation was positive. From our side, we underline the objective of the agreement is to ensure food and fertilizers reach global markets in the volume and price required to avert a global food crisis. And we've talked, I think, a lot about the impact of the war on the broader global economy. You know, before you ask a question, it's also, I think, important to add that this part of the deal, I mean, both parts are complex, but this is an especially complex trade conversation that involves many issues, that involves many parties. I mean, not only governments, but also the private sector in terms of insurance, in terms of transport, in terms of finance. And we are working hard with all the parties to eliminate the bottlenecks.
A follow-up. First of all, who represented Russia in Geneva at these
I'll
talks?
try to get you.
Okay, and then
And these were in person.
the UN ambassador here, Nebenzia, he said yesterday that Russia hasn't exported any grain or fertilizer under the deal, but there are Russian exports of these products going. So do you understand what that means?
Well, listen, I'm not here to interpret or analyze what Ambassador Nebenzia told you. This again, the Black Sea, the export from Ukrainian ports, is a much easier deal to explain, and it's much more visible. You can stand on the shores in Istanbul and count the ships going in and out. This is about facilitation of trade with the private sector. We are intervening to help expedite bottlenecks, but we do not have the ability, because we're not getting the information, to report on every trade deal that is going on. What we're doing is trying to ease the process to make sure these things go to market.
And then just one last question. What is the UN's response to President Putin saying that poor countries aren't benefiting from this deal?
Look, it's not a matter of responding to what President Putin said. The fact is that we have been extremely transparent about every ship that has gone out of Ukrainian harbors, their destination. It's in the percentage. You'll see a large number of them are going to Turkey. My understanding is that some of that is actually some of those grains are being milled and re-exported. Some of the grain is being re-exported. We've had 2 WFP ships, one going to Djibouti for Ethiopia, another one, as we mentioned, will make its way to Yemen. The grain is being offloaded in Turkey, milled, and then restocked on board the ship and heading to Yemen. WFP has chartered a 3rd ship. This initiative is about depressing global prices at the wholesale level, and that's what we're seeing from the data put forward by FAO. Mr. Bays.
Yeah, staying with Ukraine and Russia, yesterday's Security Council meeting, Director General Grossi and the Secretary General, as you know, put forward their proposal for this protection zone, and there was quite broad support among the Security Council for the idea, but we didn't see either Russia or Ukraine actually signing up to this deal. And the Russian ambassador, Ambassador Nebenzia again, said he had reservations, he wanted more details. So what are the next stages for the Secretary General to try and turn this proposal into something concrete?
I mean, listen, we're dealing with an active war zone. I don't think anybody was expecting immediate results. However, the risks continue to be immediate. So the discussions will go on with the parties to try to advance this. And it's in the interest of everyone that we avoid a catastrophe at the nuclear power plant.
And could that, I assume that the IAEA Director General is leading these efforts on behalf of the international community, but you look back at what we were just talking about, the grain deal, that in the end took the intervention of the Secretary General and a visit to both capitals. Is that something we could see again to try and secure this nuclear protection zone?
The Secretary General, I think, as you know as well as I do, will involve himself and make himself available at any point where he feels his intervention will move the process forward, and this is something that he's following very closely. Edie.
Staying on this subject, has Rebecca Greenspan been involved in these talks with Russia and
On which issue?
on the grain issue?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I just said she's chairing this meeting in Geneva with the Russian delegation.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No worries.
Could we get a briefing?
Yeah.
From her on exactly what progress has been made on this, and especially since the agreement is only a 120-day agreement, as I recall. You recall correctly. And it's going to have to be renewed if... Indeed. So... Yeah, no, I mean, we will try to get her to speak to you in what way, one way or another. No, not it's just... on the same issue. Microphone.
On the same issue.
Go ahead.
Have the Russians specified, Foreign Minister Lavrov was talking about the need for logistical sanctions to be lifted by the US and others. Have they spelled that out to the UN, what they want lifted?
It's the challenges are fairly clear, but I'm not going to get into the detail of what is being discussed around that table. Ephraim.
Thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday, there was a march in Tunisia in solidarity with mothers who have, whose sons and daughters have disappeared or died during crossing into Europe for like on a migratory journey. And then there was a comment from Vincent Cochetel, the special envoy of UNHCR for Central, Western, and Western Mediterranean, that basically blamed the mother for being responsible for their children's fate. And he said if the mothers were symbolically prosecuted, like they are in Senegal, these attitudes would change and kids would not leave home again. He apologized, but I wonder if the Secretary General had any reaction to his comment.
Listen, I haven't seen the comment. Vincent is someone who's been dealing with these issues for a long time. I think he's a true humanitarian. And again, I think if he apologized, I have nothing else to add. Edward.
Hi, Steph. Today, the Lebanese President Owen had a meeting talking about the returning of Syrian refugees, and they decided that they will send a letter to Secretary General as well as UNHCR about the position which they urged to return the Syrian refugees back to Syria. So I just want to know, is there any position change from the UN? Because I think the UNHCR is opposed the...
No, I mean, I haven't seen any policy change. Let's wait to see the letter. We believe as a matter of principle that any return should be voluntary and done in dignity and never forced. Miriam.
I have two questions, Steph. One about Afghanistan, one about Iran. In his trip to Pakistan, is Secretary General going to talk to Pakistani official about Afghanistan, situation in Afghanistan, especially women and girls, and also about situation of Afghan refugees in Pakistan who are facing many challenges?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I don't know if it will specifically come up, but we'll see what the foreign minister and the prime minister bring up in the discussions. I think Pakistan has been a country that has been a tremendous host for millions of Afghans. They are facing their own issues, and Afghan refugees are facing their own issues. But I will let you know if it comes up. And your second question?
Yes. The UN Atomic Watchdog said today that Iran has further increased the stockpile of enriched uranium purity of 60%, has reached 55%, which is more than the amount required for a nuclear bomb. Is the Secretary General aware of this new report, and is he in touch with Rafael Grossi, and also anything that you have that you can share with us on this matter?
No, nothing more than what I've seen from the IAEA, which is obviously very concerning headlines. The Secretary General has always called for Iran to follow its obligations under relevant treaties. The Russian delegation was led by, or is being led by Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs Sergei Vershinin in Geneva. Okay. Margaret.
So, Steph, on the grain deal, so 120 days for the Ukrainian part of it, but the MOU with the Russians and the UN on the food and fertilizer, that doesn't have an expiration date, I don't think,
I was hoping
right?
nobody would ask that question, so let me...
Okay, but then the question is, I don't recall that having
Yeah,
an expiration date, but if they don't renew, you know, how interlinked are these is the question. Because if one doesn't get renewed in 120 days, what happens to the other?
Let me look on the date issues on the Russian fertilizer grain deal. Abdelhamid, then Edie, then we have to go to our guests.
Thank you, Stéphane. New Israeli laws went into effect this month, making it very hard for some Palestinian Americans and other supporters of Palestine to go into Israel, including if someone has a plan to marry a Palestinian, he has to apply for a visa 40 days in advance to be approved by Israeli authorities. These new restrictions are racist in nature. Do you have any comment on that?
I will have to. I am not aware of this. Let me take a look. Edie?
Shelling resumed today near Zaporizhia. and both sides are blaming each other. I wonder, in light of yesterday's Security Council meeting and the Secretary General's remarks, whether he has any comment.
I mean, I think it just makes what the Secretary General, Mr. Grossi, said yesterday that much more relevant and that much more urgent. Okay, let me get to our guests. And